Once again, we're talking about different types of spices. And in this clip, we want to talk about one of the most mysterious spices in the world, cinnamon. Not only can you find cinnamon in different types of food around the world, you can find it in different drinks and sweets. But why is this spice mysterious? Because nobody truly knows where it came from. The first proof of cinnamon is in Egyptian writing, and it's dated around 4,000 years ago. In this writing, it basically says it has been thousands of years since Egyptians have been using this medicine. And by medicine, they're talking about cinnamon. The writing continues and says the Egyptians hid these drugs from other people, so nobody knew where it came from. And even back then, they didn't know where it came from. And even though cinnamon went all over the world, and not only did nobody know where it came from, even the Egyptians didn't know where it came from. That's how secretive it was kept a very long time ago. Right now, you can find cinnamon trees in all continents, but nobody truly knows where it originated from. As you know, in ancient Egypt, they mummified bodies. And just like cinnamon, it's very mysterious on how they did it. But when historians dug up these bodies and mummies, the first strong smell they smelt was the smell of cinnamon, and they realized that one of those things they used to mummify the body was cinnamon. After the Egyptians, where you read about cinnamon is in the ancient Hebrew Bible, and it is also written in this book that cinnamon is a medicine. In ancient Greece, they also used cinnamon for a perfume, where they rubbed it on their body. Aristotle and Herodotus, that wrote a lot of mythical things, have written that cinnamon came from a bird from Asia. And it's interesting to know that they named the bird the Cynomolgus, which is basically a bird that carries cinnamon. And they also called cinnamon cinnamon, where the English word comes from. In ancient Rome, cinnamon becomes so valuable that it has been written that you needed to work for 4 years straight, save all the wages, and you can buy 350 grams of cinnamon. You could say this was the first form of monopoly we've ever seen, because it was a small group of people that controlled all the cinnamon, and they wouldn't flood the market with it, so they can keep the price very high. Kind of like the current diamond business, where there's a whole lot of diamond around the world, but a certain group of people own them, and they don't let all of them feed to the market so they can keep the prices high. Throughout history, every region of the world has their own type of story about cinnamon. Like for example, Egyptians say it comes from Ethiopia. The Greeks say the bird brought it from Asia. The Romans and the Persians say it came from India. The Indians themselves don't even know where it came from. What is cinnamon anyways? Is it a fruit? No, cinnamon is actually a bark of the cinnamon tree, unlike other spices of the world. Until around 1500 years ago, people used cinnamon only for medicine, but after that time, people realized that this spice is actually very delicious, and they started adding it to certain foods. And just like cinnamon itself, that's a mystery in itself because nobody knows who started it, but they are positive it started somewhere in Asia because Western Europe didn't even know what cinnamon was. And that's until we get to Portugal and they finally visit India. That's the first time Western Europeans get familiar with this spice. A few years after this, the Spanish finally went to Philippines and they got familiar with cinnamon. But they could never truly plant cinnamon in their land. And that is why the Portuguese enslaved the Sri Lankan people and started farming cinnamon and sending it to Europe. In this era, one of the most important incomes for Portugal was cinnamon, where they would produce it for very cheap in Sri Lanka and send it to Europe so they can sell it for a hefty price. It's around this time that Sri Lanka, or Ceylon, turns into the hub of tea and cinnamon of the world. And to this day, the best tea and cinnamon comes from this place. Just because how valuable these spices and things were, it causes European countries to fight over it. And not just only once, but fight for centuries. After the Portuguese, the Dutch took over this part of the world. And then all of a sudden the British came along and held it for the longest time and basically owned this empire. The French are watching this from afar and they realize that they have a lot of land in Africa and the Caribbean, but they have nothing in Asia. The French government decides to sign an expert and send them to Sri Lanka by the name of Pierre Poix. And he was supposed to be a secret agent just to steal the cinnamon plant. Pierre successfully steals the plant and takes it to the Caribbean, where the French have a whole lot of land. And with the help of African slaves, they started producing cinnamon for a very cheap price. What the French did was basically break apart the monopoly around cinnamon, and by doing this, they lowered the price of it, and they caused everyone to be able to buy cinnamon now, instead of being a luxurious item only meant for rich people. And the most amount of damage an empire took was the Dutch, because they were dependent on cinnamon. Right now, there are 4 countries that produce cinnamon around the world. In number 1, we have Indonesia, that produces a quarter of the cinnamon in the whole world. Then it's Vietnam, the southern parts of China, and the highest quality cinnamon is found in Sri Lanka. When you buy powder cinnamon from the store, it is most likely gonna be from Indonesia, but some sellers want to put the name Sri Lanka on top of the cinnamon just to sell more, but it's kind of a scamming scheme. And just like other spices, there are experts that could tell these spices apart and where they came from just by the smell of it. You could see this in saffron as well. They all smell like cinnamon, but those little tiny details that you can feel and smell tell the difference. Since we got to know the history of cinnamon, is it even good for us to consume? It absolutely is. First of all, it lowers inflammation, and that means it has a lot of antioxidant. Cinnamon could make your immune system stronger, and that is why in Eastern cultures, when someone gets a cold, they usually consume cinnamon. Doctors don't really know if it actually has an effect in stopping a cold, but what they do know is that it lowers your blood sugar. So people with diabetes are recommended to eat more cinnamon. Using cinnamon daily not only lowers your blood pressure, but it also lowers cholesterol. And just like other spices, it speeds up your metabolism. To this day, a lot of cultures still use cinnamon as a medicine, and you can't really blame them because it's an insanely useful spice. If you have sweet food, sour food, or salty food, cinnamon could enhance the flavor. You really can't find other types of spices and plants that you don't know the true history of it. And that is why cinnamon is considered a very mysterious spice.